Hi there. I am the proud owner of a 2017 Chevy Volt, a heather gray one, just like the one in this picture. But I'm showing you the one in this picture because it looks a lot cleaner than mine. So, what I want to talk about tonight is the fuel efficiency and the way that the car calculates its fuel efficiency. Because if you own this car or you're thinking about owning this car, I imagine that fuel efficiency is something that's important to you. Um, Prior to this car, I owned a 2005 Honda Civic, and every time I put fuel in the tank of that car, I would always check its fuel efficiency, as a health check if anything else. And that was a nice car. In the cold weather here in the Northeast, it got 30 miles per gallon, 32 miles per gallon. In the warmer weather, 35, 36 miles per gallon. It was nice. When I found out I could get an electric car that was rated for a combined greater than 70 mpg equivalent, or in electric mode greater than 100 miles per gallon equivalent, I was pretty excited. So when it came time to go shopping for a car, I didn't want to wait for a Tesla Model 3. I picked up a Chevy Volt. I love it. But one of the things that I really like about it is the fact that the car gives you efficiency stats. I'm so fascinated with the screen, I always drive around with my infotainment system set just like this, so that whenever I want I can look over and see exactly how efficient my car is running. So every day, every trip I take in my car, whenever I stop wherever I'm going, I take my iPhone out and grab a picture just like this one, so that I can go back later and see how the car is done over time. So, taking a look here, in this particular case, the car went 20 miles on 4.6 kilowatt hours for what the car says is 122 mpg. Now, what's an mpge? Well, consult Google and it brings you to Wikipedia, where there is an excellent article about mpge. And what this article establishes is that 1 mpge is equal to approximately 33.7 kilowatt hours. I believe that's determined by the U.S. Department of Energy. So based on that, I should be able to determine the miles per kilowatt hour consumed and then multiply by 33.7 kilowatt hours to get the miles per gallon equivalent. So, go into my favorite math processing program and I say 20 divided by 4.6. So here we are at 4.348 miles per kilowatt hour. I take my 4.348 miles per kilowatt hour and multiply it by 33.7, and it tells me that I'm getting 146.28 miles per gallon equivalent. Now wait a second. The computer says I'm getting 122 miles per gallon equivalent. Why don't they match? What does the car's computer know that I don't know? What's it taking into account that I can't see? Well, after some more Googling around, I've discovered what I think is the solution, and that is that the car takes into account the charging efficiency. Read further down in this interesting article about mpge, and it goes on to discuss how in electric cars the Department of Energy says that the energy has to be calculated on a wall to wheels basis in order to make a fair comparison to a gasoline car. And that is to say that if you put 8 gallons of gasoline in your car, you know that you've put in that energy content. When you consume energy in your electric car, this right here, this 4.6 kilowatt hours doesn't necessarily represent the energy that was put into the car to use 4.6 kilowatt hours. It turns out that the conversion of the AC power to charge the DC battery has an efficiency factor. And That is what affects this value right here. Now, in order to prove that, I had to do an experiment. So I looked back through my log, and I happened to find that on April 10th, I had all the data I needed to prove or disprove this. Just like I used to collect data for my Honda Civic. So what I have here is it was a beautiful warm day in April, unseasonably warm. I drove my car from where I live in Gloucester, Massachusetts, to where I go to school in the evenings after work, the University of Massachusetts Lowell. So in the course of that trip, don't mind my dusty infotainment system, I used 8.6 kilowatt hours of energy. Now, using the analogy for a gasoline car, I had started with a full battery before I left. I got to this point and know that I used 8.6 kilowatt hours. I should be able to look at how much energy went into the car and get an efficiency factor from that. So, turns out here at UMass Lowell, there's an EV charging station. It's a charge point. I have an account with them. And on that day, it turns out that to top off my car, the car took 9.995 kilowatt hours. So, I take 9.995, I take 8.3, .6 kilowatt hours and divide by 9.995. According to the charge point receipt and what my car says, the car was 86% efficient in charging at that station. Now, the question is, after I drove that, what was the implied efficiency of my car? Later that night, I drove home. You can see here that I went 45 miles, about the same as on the way up. I used 7.8 kilowatt hours and got what the computer says was 163 mpge. Alright, so if I go through the same exercise, with the right numbers, I went 45.1 miles on 7.8 kilowatt hours, which says that I got 5.782 miles per kilowatt hour. I take my 5.782 and multiply by the number of kilowatt hours in a gallon of gasoline, and again, my calculation says that my car got almost 195 mpge. But the car says, I keep going back to the old number, the car says that I got 163. I wonder if the relationship between those two numbers is the efficiency rating. I take my 163. 163 miles per gallon and divide it by 195, and it spits out this number, 0.84. So what I have here is an implied efficiency at the charging station of 0.86 and an implied efficiency at home later that night of 0.84. That is pretty close for me. It seems to me that the car must be taking into account the total amount of energy it's pulling from the wall. I think it's safe to assume that of those 9.995 kilowatt hours that the charge point station gave me.